So welcome. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you all so much for joining us today. If you'd like to say hi in the chat box, feel free to share where you're calling in from as we move through the introductions. We'd love to hear. So before we begin, I'd love to just land in the space together with 3 deep breaths and just let our nervous system settle. So at your own time. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for taking the time to gather together in community and learn from each other as we explore the nuanced and liminal spaces of identity, of becoming, of living in our fullest expression. So this is one of many regular events through our community and integration platform, the Maloka, where we offer workshops, talks, sharing circles, and more from teachers, practitioners, luminaries across the many fields of holistic health. So as we move through the conversation today, if you have any specific questions you'd like to ask, I'll invite you to please type them into the chat box. We'll get to them as we can, either in the conversation or at the end. So we'll have some time set aside at the end for Q&A. And if at that point you have a question as well, you can raise your hand by clicking the little emoji face at the bottom of the screen that says reactions. And there's a raise hand button there. So I'll invite you to raise your hand, and then I'll say, go ahead and ask the question. You can unmute yourself. So to minimize background noise, I'll also ask that all audience members, please keep your microphones on mute unless, of course, you're asking the question during the Q&A portion. So I am especially excited for this panel today. Each of our speakers I hold in great respect for who they are and for the way that they have chosen to show up in their own full and authentic expressions and share their unique medicines with the world. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves more fully, but today we are joined by clinical psychologist and author, Dr. Clancy Kavnar, medicine steward and multidisciplinary artist, Sensei Kevon Simpson, psychedelic science researcher and educator, Amy Bartlett, and this is a new one for me, psychedelic clinician scientist, Terrence Ching. So to kick this off, we'll go in that order and have each of the panelists introduce themselves. So Dr. Kavnar, Sensei Kevon, Amy, and then Terrence. And again, thank you all so much for being here.
All right, thank you, Melissa. Thank you for having this forum. My name's Clancy Kavnar. I'm a clinical psychologist in private practice in San Francisco. And I have edited 10 books with my partner, Bia Labachi, on psychedelics of different kinds, a lot on ayahuasca. And I'm also the associate director of Chacruna Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines, which has a website and a bunch of forums and conferences and different educational things that they produce. I do the editing for that website. And I am also a member of Santo Daime, which is an ayahuasca religion from Brazil. And I've been a member since 1997. So that was my first adult use of psychedelics in a more serious way. And I went to school and got my doctorate, did my dissertation on ayahuasca and gay people, which kind of ushered me into this whole psychedelic scene that, I was pretty much just a daimista, which is a Christian religion that's very conservative and not very cool in many ways, but we do drink ayahuasca. So that sort of ushered me into this much more groovy scene of psychedelics in general. So I am also an artist, and I have a master's in fine art from the San Francisco Art Institute, and I'm originally from New Jersey. That's my introduction.
Thank you, Clancy. Sensei Kavan.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for creating this beautiful container. And thank you, Clancy, because your work and your research and my fingers in a Google search is doing something that I never imagined it would do. And so I just wanted to really thank you and honor you and let you know that I'm sending you so much love to you and to Bia, because you guys have changed my life. And there's just no other way to say it. And I'm getting teary-eyed, so I have to say that thank you before I say anything else. I am a crazy Jamaican Afro-Taino from Brooklyn, New York, and Kingston, Jamaica. And what that means is sometimes I don't know where I fit or where I belong, even inside my own self. Who am I now? Post-pandemic, I have turned into something that I'm still uncovering and understanding, and using that way of being to create further generations of guardianship of sacred medicines. And so currently that means teaching a micro martial arts class where we microdose and do karate and learn basic Shotokan karate self-defense techniques. It is my understanding that the planes, what we do on each affects the other. So I want to create a generation of strong people. And that's where I'm at now with the work. And that's me in a nutshell. And I look forward to sharing more.
Thank you so much, Kavan. Go ahead, Amy.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name's Amy. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight and to be in conversation with these amazing group of people. I'm based here in Ottawa, Canada. I'm from the East Coast, New Brunswick. I'm a lawyer by trade. I've been working in human rights and social justice for the past 20 years, 10 of those years overseas. On the side, I began my psychedelic journey, and it was a very personal thing for me for a long time. But as I moved back to Canada, I got involved, and I now run the Psychedelic Society here in Ottawa. I run all our integration circles, started organizing events, getting involved in some of the research, and a colleague is like, why don't you do your PhD? So, okay, I'll do my PhD. So I'm doing my PhD in the role of identity, intersectionality, and community in psychedelic healing. I work with Dr. Wanaka Williams and Dr. Ann Vallely, so I'm sort of bridging the gap between psychology and religion, and really excited about that liminal space in how we think about and use psychedelics. I'm really passionate about identity, and in the context of this conversation, really excited about the potential that queerness has for our understanding of psychedelics and how we heal ourselves and support each other in that work. I'm also an end-of-life doula, and I do sitting and ceremony as well. So yeah, really excited to be part of this conversation, and really honored to, again, be talking with you this evening. So yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Terrence.
Thanks, Melissa and Clancy and Sensei Kavan and Amy. My name is Terrence. I am based in New Haven, Connecticut. In my professional life, I am a postdoc associate currently at the Yale School of Medicine in the Department of Psychiatry. And that is where most of my psychedelic work and adventures reside currently. Have the privilege, the extreme privilege of being able to do research on psychedelics. Have been a part of MAP-sponsored MDMA trials, and currently am developing psilocybin therapy trials for OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. in my personal life, I am Terrence, and I hail from Singapore, which is a tiny island nation in Southeast Asia. I am now newly a permanent resident in the United States after meeting my husband in Connecticut. I enjoy little artsy things like paint pouring and comics, and I love tennis. And trying to think of other ways to to identify beyond the professional. And yeah, I like to think that I'm an easygoing person, and I identify as a cisgender gay male.
Thank you so much, Terrence. Appreciate that. Yeah, so in preparation for this conversation, something really interesting that came up and why we decided to call this panel Liminal Spaces is the unique intersection that each of you embody by being active members of both the psychedelic community and the queer community, and how each has helped solidify or inform the other in terms of identity and authenticity. And this idea that there is both empowerment and challenges that come with being out as a psychedelic user in this society and being out as a member of the queer community. So I'd like to start there and just hear from each of you what that journey has been like for you, discovering who you are and your path, getting to this point where you are living your truth as part of communities that have been and can be marginalized in today's world, and the interplay between them if they've had interplay as you've discovered your own path. So if it's okay, I'd love to start with Sensei Kavan, just hear a little more about your journey.
I was in my head saying I'm not gonna go first, but here I am. Okay. Well, it has been beautiful and extremely challenging. A few years ago, we had to be a lot more hush hush and coded with sharing of ceremony in the underground, so to speak. So in the ceremonial space, in the healing space, where so much of the consistent container of the world that triggers the trauma, so to speak, so much of that comes up. And in those spaces, it's just extremely highlighted in a way that was severing to my hope, in a way that was almost impossible to continue. I know I'm speaking around it, so to speak, but how do you heal when the world container is still the way it is what I'm really trying to communicate was so challenging and so molding to who I became or am or whatever, no time, no time, still discovering it. I was a lot softer before the high dose ceremonies I was doing during specifically the lockdowns. Were they beautiful? Was joy in them? Absolutely, of course. Were there things that I saw shamanically that I wish I could get the people to see? Yes, but knowing that that the outing, right, seems to come from something really dramatic, and that cultural COVID thing, to make it small, was a forced outing. Not only for me, but for many in my community, because of the level of suffering that a lot of us were going through and are now on the other side of, so to speak. So I'm not sure if I answered all of what you're aiming to hear. Still a work in progress in regards to who it is I am as an out person, as an out psychedelic person, but I have been confident enough to get some of my community members to start microdosing their families unknowingly sometimes because it's that safe. I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I really appreciate the idea of this, the world container, and really understanding how to navigate some of these spaces, especially as the trauma and suffering and mental illness and physical illness just has worsened so much in the past couple of years, in the past few years, and it was already suffering, that it is sort of forcing this openness of, hey, you know, we need to do something different at this point. And these medicines are here to help us. And that it really interesting intersection of how this is now coming to light in a different way. And yeah, I think it's a ceremony, absolutely, that's been happening and kind of forcing that out. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Anyone else wants to share? Yeah, Clancy.
I think that, like, I've always been kind of an outsider. You know, I was bullied in school, and I just felt like being gay was part of being an outsider, and taking psychedelics. Well, being in Santo Daime was also like, not only was it a psychedelic thing, but it was also like a weird religion from people talking in different languages, and it was just pretty far out there. And what I found is that these groups of people that are kind of shoved to the side have a lot in common. So gay people who have been forming their own communities and having their own inside jokes and culture, and people who are taking psychedelics or any kind of drugs actually have their own drug culture that is like exclusive to them. It's like an in-group, and but psychedelics is more like for people that are trying to heal or trying to, like, not all of it, of course, there's people that take psychedelics for fun, but I just think there's a power in being out about what you're into if it's on the outskirts. So people who come out of the closet, or people find other people who come out of the closet, and then, like, that's the coolest group of people. And people who take psychedelics and talk about it, about how good it is and how helpful it is, that's a cool group of people that I want to know. So it really has helped me find people in that intersection as well. Like, the people who are gay who take psychedelics are people that I like to hang out with and talk to, and I feel close to them, not just because we have those two things, but like all the experiences that add up to lead into being a gay person who takes psychedelics for healing. And there's, you know, so much to heal when you grow up gay and in our culture. So we all have that in common too. And just thinking about groups like, you know, the Coquettes, or like gay societies that use psychedelics for healing also, just is to me like the coolest group of people. And I so much want to be cool that I'm happy that I found us.
I really appreciate what you were sharing, Clancy, and that whole thing. Psychedelics, in terms of being queer and psychedelics, I've learned, you know, when we deny who we are, it's also difficult to see others as they are. I found in my journey, it's been this sort of walk of one step seeing myself, one step seeing others. And it's been this sort of like two-legged progression of finding myself and then finding others in that. And it's been a big witnessing and a seeing. Growing up in the 1980s in rural New Brunswick, you know, obviously there was no internet at that time, but as we all know too, queerness wasn't okay. The AIDS crisis, and also a lot of stigma to mental health. You know, I think a big a powerful part of working with psychedelics and also being queer is the vulnerability and the truth pieces that come. And it's really helped me understand and accept and see who I am as a woman, as a queer person, as a white person, with all of the accountability and privilege that comes with that, as a sexual abuse survivor, and as a divine and beautiful being. You know, it's been really interesting navigating all of the vulnerability and all of the truth and all of the light and all of the shadow is revealed in that witnessing and seeing of self and of others. And it's been interesting getting to know myself, but also finding myself in communion with others. It's amazing how often we can't think our way out of ourselves. And I've been really grateful to, like you say, connect with some of the queer community and people in safe containers where we know we've got something in common, and those tender, vulnerable parts are going to be honored and respected. And then you can breathe into those spaces and be in those spaces in ways that I found so healing and I've been so grateful for. So yeah, it's a messy journey, but it's authentic. Now that's all I can ask for. So that's how it's been for me.
Amy, and thanks everyone who has shared. I am very, very thoughtful right now, and the word that really jumps out to me in this moment is closet. So as you might expect, growing up, just chronic bullying in school. Middle school was rough, high school was rougher. And growing up with this idea, almost belief that idea of a relationship was a myth. It was a fantasy. It was something that I won't have and I may never have. And going back to what I said before about being able to do psychedelics in research being a privilege, I think it cannot be understated, because in many ways I was able to talk about, you know, having been trained in MDMA and taking MDMA freely. And for many people, that is a closet in itself. The idea of using psychedelics for healing in private is something that people don't freely share. And here I am, you know, out here writing about it, talking about it. But it was through that particular experience with MDMA that really pulled me out of the other closet, the sexuality closet. And that was just a thought that formed in my head, hearing everyone's experiences, because I was able to discover parts of myself, and I believe that's what psychedelics mostly do for people, truth. The little layers, deeper layers of truth about yourself, living authentically. And to live authentically, I had to come out of the sexuality closet. And I did it in very traumatic, I think Clancy can speak to this in my presentation at Queering Psychedelics. That was me coming out of the sexuality closet, talking about my MDMA experience, identifying as gay in front of an audience when I hadn't told my parents that I was gay before that time. Writing about being gay and having my parents discover that article. So all of these were very demonstrative of how coming to the psychedelic closet for me pulled me out of my sexuality closet. And to honor that that privilege, and I guess in my own humble way to give back, I wrote about it, and I'm happy to share a link. But the purpose of that paper really was, I guess, embolden people to do the same, to come out of their own respective closets, however safe they feel, to be able to do that. But I have more thoughts, but I'm sure we'll get into those later on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Terrence. I hope people can still hear me because our power did go out, but sorry if I look a little creepy. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the way that you coming out of the psychedelic closet and just honoring also your bravery in doing that in front of an audience in such a public manner, and similarly coming out as a queer person. You know, those are big steps, and you did that in a really big way. And so just really honoring that courage. And I think it's, you know, to Amy's point of the way that both of these communities and both of these identifications really come with a sense of authenticity and vulnerability and a confrontation of self, meeting the world in that way. And something that I think is really interesting to understand is the way that the healing journey moves through effects and is affected by both our internal and external worlds. So I'll start this question directed to Terrence and then open it up to anyone else. What do you think are, or what has been for you, some of the contextual or environmental factors that accelerate or impede these realizations of identity and intersectionality? And we can start there, but also if you'd like to expand on how they affected you in particular in your journey, or how you see them affecting the communities that you're a part of.
I think that's a great question. I think really speaking to the idea of living authentically as a journey. And really, you know, that's what life is. It's a journey, at least in my opinion, to be able to savor every part of that process. And not only just savor, but the larger picture might be to think about whether it's safe to exist in that identity at a particular time in your life, at a particular situation in your life, in a particular environment. So really thinking carefully about how to live authentically, thinking about whether is there a should here about living loud and proud 24/7, or can that, you know, be adapted to the particular situation you find yourself in? And yeah, I think I'm just speaking to the idea of being able to adapt and attune to the different circumstances you find yourself in. You know, how far do you want to show people who you really are? Is it okay to not do that, but not go back in the closet? I think those are little tension points in living as a sexually diverse person, or part of the larger community of sexual diversity, and only speaking to that aspect of one's identity, right? Like, you know, you could have a different conversation around gender diversity, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That balancing factor of, you know, how does one balance being authentic and also navigating family dynamics and social marginalization and internalized stigma, like the environment, the external factors that are a part of our healing journey. You know, how does one navigate those things with a sense of really connecting to that authenticity. And I think this similar can be said also for people practicing or working with psychedelics. I mean, Sensei Kavan, you've been in the underground medicine world for a long time, really navigating these worlds of stigmatization on many levels. And yeah, I'm just curious if you've come up against some of those factors, or what that's been like for you as both a medicine steward and a member of the queer community.
Well, I came out when I was 16, so those two things aren't separate for me. Coming out to Jamaican high school, Jamaican family, and all this other stuff, to make it a long story short, I had to become, at the time I didn't know it was a shaman. I was just trying to heal myself in many different ways. I just had to, so those are glued together for me because they had to be for my survival. I grew up in the church and grew up with my mom with oracle cards and stuff, and it was like I was kind of being molded and guided to be this person. That understanding that came through some of my high dose work in Journal Square, Jersey. I lived in Jersey for a few years when I wanted to throw away my whole New York life and rebirth myself. So my time in Jersey is a point in my process where place was important. I was living with my fiance. He was, exposed me to all this information, all of these poets I'd never heard of, all these books, and some schooling I didn't get in American public schooling. And it was beautiful for a while. And that led to us going online and looking for the recipe for ayahuasca. Thank God it didn't work. The two of us in the dark we're making. Thank God it didn't work. I knew nothing about anything. I hadn't even led my first circle yet, or I just needed to heal myself, right? And the place allowed for that transformation because love was a part of that container. In my other ceremonies, place has been the hurdle. In the ghetto of Brooklyn, place is a hurdle. Or even, and that doesn't have to be the ghetto, right? It could just be an urban environment where you're just hearing sirens all the time. And that can be a challenge if you're conditioned to a Western life, like we all are, and you want to wake up in comfort, like we all do. Hearing or even gunshots sometimes becomes a challenge that I don't even want to speak on, but it's the reality of urban shamanism. So place has, with my boo, with my bae, I was Mr. Soft Poet. But place has turned me into Mr. Sensei, who's soft sometimes, but I have to be very aware that my neighbor said through the wall, "Faggot, you're dead," because he heard me singing a love song through the wall. That's where we're at with the world right now. That's how emboldened people feel. So place and psychedelic work is making me remember that I can, if I have to make myself survive so that the medicine can continue. And there's joy in that.
I really like that of place, and it makes me, and Terrence, I feel like you talked a little bit about time. I've been kind of thinking, as you folks have been sharing too, around, I guess, the sort of seeing and being seen, in the sense of, in terms of the, your question, Melissa, in terms of, the environmental or contextual factors, this ability to be seen and to see ourselves in the world around us. Things are improving, I think, in the world, and at least queerness is no longer a pathology in the DSM. It's no longer a mental illness, but we still have a long way to go. And I've been interested in, Kavan, what you were saying about love in space, and bringing my lawyer hat to the love in law and love in regulations. There's a really interesting Indigenous scholar here in Canada. Oh, sorry, I see my thing has gone fuzzy. Figure that out. Called John. His name is John Burroughs, and he talks a lot about love as a public good. And not to get too woo, I know we can do this in the psychedelic space, but I am really interested in time and space and seeing and what we see and what we don't. And we don't see love, we don't see each other. The ways in which we construct our environments and the environmental spaces in which we operate, we don't see love, we don't feel love, and it's hard to find each other and see ourselves in these institutions and structures in which we all have to operate. And, you know, I'm curious about and interested in how we can better leverage love as a public good. And I do feel like queerness can help do that, and psychedelics can help do that in our understanding of self and understanding of others. Again, those factors of vulnerability and truth, the being and seeing each other in being. I just wanted to put that out there as an idea. I feel like there's physical place, and there's also structural space and structural place, the political space in which we all operate and live. And I'm so grateful for this conversation and the conversations we get to have together in public and talk about love and truth, not as, you know, broad concepts, but like concretely, what does love look like in our public spaces? How do we make our laws loving? How do we hold ourselves to account to be loving? So yeah, that just, the ways that some of the things that you folks have shared really sparked that for me. So I just wanted to share that, and thank you.
I really love that, because I think love is the antidote to fear. And there is a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear in the political space. There's a lot of fear in a lot of physical spaces right now in the world. And I believe that, you know, radical acceptance of self and the full spectrum of identity, which is embraced in the queer community, and also that radical acceptance of self and connection to love is really profound and comes through in the psychedelic space for many people, and ultimately is the result of a lot of medicine work. And so I think that's really beautiful, and I think it's absolutely time for yeah, it's crazy here in the jungle. It's absolutely time for love to have a bigger presence in the world. And I think both of these communities have a real opportunity to embrace that.
Yeah, I wanted to say that as a therapist, I see the shame as the biggest problem for people, for gay people, that I think ayahuasca, psychedelics in general, but ayahuasca in particular, can really address. And that's such a hard thing to break through. And the context that one can break through it really very safe, because shame comes up when things are unsafe. And that's how we like protect ourselves, is hiding, but that hiding comes at such a great cost. And I think like psychedelics' ability to like take off the various layers of armor that we have, like it can do that very strongly. But if we are willing to like drop the shame that comes with being told there's something wrong with you when you're young, and just, I really still don't understand how sexuality has such a pervasive, like it's not just like you're gay, it's like your whole thing is gay, everything is queer. It's not just like, you know, you like to sleep with women, so that makes you gay. But so the antidote, like getting rid of the shame gets rid of the shame of all of yourself, not just that you like the same sex, but like you're an okay person and stuff that you do is good and you have a contribution to make. So I think that safety is the first thing that you need in order to heal, and then the thing that you're healing a lot of times is shame, and how to do that with psychedelics is way faster and more effective than just talking about it.
Curious if you could elaborate on that a little, Clancy, talking about how, you know, it's not just who you want in a partner, but how everything is queer. Is that, yeah, just curious if you could share a little more about what that means.
Well, there are many single gay people who continue to bear the burden of being considered gay by people who either can't hide it because they, even if they wanted to, or people who, you know, even if they just are being themselves, other people come with an attitude towards them that, you know, consistently that, you know, that they're an outsider, that there's something wrong, or that the things that they do are no good. And when you take psychedelics, you get to see how beautiful you are. And that's true for, I think, for everybody, but for people who have been told that they're not, it's such a great feeling to find that out. It was for me just like, oh, I am as great as I had always hoped I might be, you know, not, you know, compared to other people or whatever, but just like as a person, I'm like other people who deserve to have a good life and can expect like other people to support me when I have problems.
I want to echo that. I think it's, for me, a sense of, you know, this is what's evoking in me when we talk about shame, is the idea of relying on stereotypical categories to understand people. I think it's evolved through modern times to because things are complex and we don't like complex things. We're struggling. It's just so much easier to put people into check boxes, and this idea of gay is all you need to know about me because it helps your understanding. Almost feels like the gay person or the queer person is standing judger and looking at themselves. And psychedelics is that dissolver of those boundaries. And there are many, as you know, well, liminal spaces, the many gradations of and complexities of the human experience, of the global human experience that make us realize that there's more in this equation than a simple checkbox. And psychedelics is that lubricant for that understanding.
I love that. I love that. And it really points to this sort of empowerment of expanding beyond the checkbox of identities as well, right? So it's interesting to think about this balance of sort of embracing an identity, which may involve many subsets of identities, and then also understanding that we're not just these things that can be listed out. That's a really interesting balance. Yeah, I'm curious if there's any thoughts on how you do self-identify, or, you know, if and how, and, you know, do psychedelics kind of take you beyond that space, or do they help you clarify, you know, what it is that how you see yourself, or how you belong in a specific.
I love the background noise of the thunder. Melissa, it's so perfect and so dramatic. And maybe like inspired by that, or on that note, again, and not to go too deeply into it, but I think part of, in terms of identity and psychedelics, part of what I've been consistently surprised by is in tackling that shame that you folks were talking about. Not only, you know, am I deserving of, I'm still not there, I still feel that even saying it. not only am I deserving of love and respect and all the things that we know that we all are as human beings, but it's also the spiritual self and that transpersonal experience that has been healing and surprising and interesting to incorporate into how I understand myself and what it is to understand myself as a human being that has a mind and a soul and body, all the different parts that make us who we are as an identity. It's, again, a tricky thing to navigate when it comes to ego. You know, we all know about spiritual bypassing and some of the ways in which that knowing and that truth can be challenging as part of like how to bring that into our identity and know those things and also be healthy and not use that as a distraction from the hard work that we're doing to try to unpeel the layers and be authentic and find truth. But it's been, yeah, I'm curious if other folks have, how you folks have been navigating your spiritual self, that small, you know, little universe that beats in all of us, and how that has intersected with your sense of identity and your queerness. Because I feel very queer. when I'm here, I'm queer in a very fulsome way that feels really authentic and really complex in all the beauty that complexity brings.
In response to what you just said, I think what has been helpful to me is cultivation. And in cultivating, you learn, and like the fungi just speak to you in just these strange ways. And what it said to me, you know, it releases billions of spores, right? And you're just like, billions, you're just like, okay, billions of spores. It said to me, every spore is an individual. Every spore is an individual. And I went, whoa, my goodness. And knowing that and how many of them there are, I kind of start to look at people that way, myself that way, so that the comparing and how it gives rise to the shame can have less room. Because I'm like a spore, you know, we're like little spores, and every spore is an individual. You know?
I think that resonates very much with me. There's tension about the use of labels with me. When I say gay, cisgender, male, that doesn't quite capture everything there is to know about me. But then, you know, like there's this struggle to say more about who I am, and then feeling at a loss for words sometimes, which to me indicates that I've been living in this culture where I've internalized that it's okay to describe myself with a few labels. And hopefully that communicates the same thing that I think it should communicate to other people. But the idea of being an individual, in other talks, I talk about how the diversity of psychedelic experience is as vast as the number of people taking psychedelics for the number of times that they're taking them. And that to me, it was like, oh, wow. If a simple, well, not simple, well, if a psychedelic experience can be that diverse, why can't we, right? Like, I am a person, I'm an individual, and I'm connected to other individuals, and let them speak for me and let that speak for myself, right? Like, let what I do, what I say, every ounce of my being and my track record and, you know, like my life lived so far speak for myself and helping people understand who I am, as opposed to a few labels. But there is always a tension there, and that's probably the product of living in this world for however many years. And so, yeah,
Yeah, thanks so much. It's definitely a very interesting journey, and especially having navigated some medicine spaces, and yeah, like as you mentioned, Amy, the transpersonal effect that psychedelics do have, and the claiming and the empowerment that comes with the claiming of, this is who I am, and this is how I live, and this is my identity. And something that, Amy, that you had said about this topic during our discussions that really stuck out to me was that part of healing is about having choice and feeling empowered to exercise that choice, rather than being driven by trauma and external forces in the way that we navigate our lives and the world. And so I'm curious how that healing, that empowerment of choice, has shown up for you in your journey.
Yeah. Again, I'd be interested to hear from others too. I find as I walk down these paths and as we explore identity with psychedelics and through psychedelics, part of what it feels like to heal and what it feels like to be authentic is to have choice, to not be driven by the traumas and the responses and the stories that we tell and the duct tape that we wind around ourselves to keep ourselves put together. And I think it's interesting to think about choice as a healing act, and to choose things and even to want things. I think so much of, again, going back to the big structures, but we're told, and what you were saying, Terrence, too, like we're told what we need to be, or the labels we need to attach to, or how we need to present ourselves to be accepted or to be recognized even as a human being in society sometimes. So being able to make choices about how we show up to ourselves and not worry about how the external is going to react to it, and be certain and clear and grounded in knowing, can be beautiful. It's something I've struggled with, but been really interested in. I can choose something different. It sounds silly, a small example. I always wear dresses in the summer. I hate it. I hate it. And this, I sew, I do a lot of sewing. And I just made myself a bunch of summer pants. I'm like, I don't want to wear dresses anymore. And it never occurred to me to make that choice. And it's not solely a gender expression thing, but it is a little bit. It's like, this doesn't feel right. But it never occurred to me to make a different choice. I've been wearing dresses for a decade in the summer. And this summer, I'm like, I don't want to. And it feels like such a revolution, this revolution in my tiny little baby heart of like, I'm going to do something that I want to do in a very small way. It's a very small gesture, but exercising that muscle of choice for me is just all these tiny, small little personal revolutions that translate into bigger pieces and gestures of bravery in the world and with myself and with others. And so it's the choice piece has been really small but mighty in playing with this question of identity and healing and authenticity. So yeah, I'm curious if that resonates, or if I'm my wardrobe choices maybe don't matter as much, but yeah, how do you folks experience choice in your negotiation with identity?
You're like, I think listening to what you're saying, I was thinking about my own path to psychedelics and healing from my own stuff. And I started in Santo Daime, which is no choices. Like you wear a uniform with a dress and you have to have long hair, and it's men on one side, women on the other. It's so structured, and you can't cross your arms. You can't, there's many rules, and lots of them about your gender. And I found that liberating. I found it liberating to disappear into a wall of other people dressed exactly like me. We're all so conformed, and like I don't know how many of them might have been queer. I'm sure there were more than were out, because it was a very conservative environment. But and like having ceremony Tuesday night that lasts until 5 a.m, and then have another one on Thursday, like according to this crazy schedule, and like ironing your shirt, you're like just getting into a uniform that is something I would never wear in real life, or real life. And for me, that like, it really helped me. It helped me because I didn't have to be anybody except a daimista in that role. If I practiced the music and danced like everybody else, I could just let go of that identity of myself and have a chance to just like be free of that. And until I became comfortable with it, more comfortable, and grew into it, I guess it was helpful for me. I know that's like counter, and I would not recommend it to other people. Like, go join a cult that you don't understand and wear a uniform and sing in a language you don't understand, and do that for like 10 years, and you'll really get somewhere in the end. I mean, I don't know who would sign up for that really, but I did by accident kind of, and so that was my experience anyway.
I think that's a really, really poignant perspective on the way that actually dissolving into the belonging of a community can actually support you in really finding out who you are, and the release of a certain label and a certain identity that maybe has had a certain meaning for you, or has affected you in a certain way, and actually being able to release that for a period of time to enter into a state of community and belonging, and how that can actually be really healing too. I think that's a really powerful perspective that I wouldn't have thought of. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So on the topic of safety, and related also to the empowerment of choice, something that comes up within this space is that as much as we can know who we are, sometimes, and especially if that identity is so often stigmatized and marginalized in society, it can be unsafe to be completely out and open about either your queerness or your work in psychedelics. So what are your perspectives on balancing honoring your authentic self with the reality in which we have these situations, which may not always be a safe space to be completely authentic? And Terrence, I'll start with you. What can maintaining the empowerment of choice look like in these situations?
Yeah, that's so tricky, and this is putting me in spot. Oh, let me put on my prescriptive hat and say a list of recommendations for people. But no, like most definitely not. Find what works for you. Safety is so important. You can't be queer if you're dead. That's so real. And like, or if you're homeless, I guess you can, but it wouldn't be comfortable. So I think in this moment, to me, there are easy and hard choices. Like there are easy choices to blend in, to fit in, to fly under the radar, not stand out, get by, survive, and then with the promise of thriving later on, when you do find yourself in a space where it's okay to be loud and proud, and hard choices where there's a lot of anger, right? Like in being defiant, anger is that fuel to choose to wear pants instead of dresses, to paint your nails, to wear an earring, to pierce your nipples, etc. Different ways in which you express your queerness, or your individuality. And I think there are considerations around, like, if I make this choice, is it okay for me to make this choice? Is it safe? Is it reversible? How do I do this without feeling like I'm compromising my outness? How do I do this without going back in the closet? I don't think there's any easy answer to that. And a lot of the times, I think retrospectively, we make sense of what the choices we've made in arriving at this place and time where we find ourselves. But yeah, you know, there aren't any easy recommendations, and there are some obvious don'ts, right? Like, you know, don't, or do, I mean, if you really want to. So I think, you know, like, there's no obvious answer at the end of the day. And I'm starting to sound incoherent, and I think it speaks to the sheer exhaustion one experiences in trying to make a choice about how to live, and the anger that one has in realizing that your straight friend doesn't have to go through what you just went through.
Could I jump in, Terrence? I love that. And it really resonates. You know, when you said you can't be queer and dead, it really struck a chord. And I was thinking about, because I do work with end of life clients, and the sort of existential angst at that time of life and towards that transition. And I think about, you know, in that context of choice and identity, you know, how simple at the end of life things are as the veil is thin, in the sense that, you know, in looking retrospectively and looking back, it's we all know this, but it's often we regret the things we didn't do, not the things we did do often. And so you know, not to like tie things up into bows and stuff like that, but I think back to some of the pieces around love, and, you know, thinking about, you know, the very difficult question that was posed to you about, like, how do we make choices safely? I just wonder about, you know, making choices guided by love. What is the loving choice? What is the loving thing? And moving towards, in my experience, moving towards yes, because no is often from a place of fear, and yes is often a place of love. Not always. But I worked with a client recently, and their reflections on what they regretted was often the things they didn't do. Again, we all know this. But I wonder about, in navigating choice in the present, it's easy to look back and like, oh gosh, I wish I had done this thing. But in navigating choice in the present, you know, being guided by yes, being guided by love as much as possible, and trust. We have to keep ourselves safe, but I'm so tired of regretting. I'm so tired of making choices based on fear. And I'd like to make more choices based on love. I'd like to regret less when it's my turn to transition into or out of this body. I don't know if that resonates. I don't know. I struggle with the safety versus abundance, and just accepting and moving in the world in a loving way. I don't know. What do you folks think about that?
I
I
think
think there's,
they're. Oh, go for it, Clancy.
well, I was just gonna say, I think there are safe places to consume psychedelics where I do feel Soltara being one of them, like perfectly safe, and I don't think anyone's gonna say anything or do anything that's gonna freak me out or whatever. And that is the number one thing when you're not completely competent or whatever to perceive your environment, to know that you're safe and you can go out as far as you want into the astral. Um, my mind just went blank. Sorry.
Yeah,
I had another point that I was going to make.
that's okay. Can come back
Yeah,
to
sorry.
it. Terrence, I don't know if you had something there. Yvonne.
I think they're compatible. I think there there is an in spite of that comes up to me, making choices with love and with yes, in spite of fears for your safety. Um, yeah, that's a good reminder for me to tune my frequencies every now and then.
Yeah.
I will say less now.
Choice. Knowing who you are. Self-love. Allowing the label that limited you to fall. So for me, the label that limited me was being seen as the angry black man. I want to be seen as the angry black man. And then I didn't want to be seen as the angry feminine black man or the angry queer gay. So what that did to me was a beautiful thing. It made me study all this mindfulness stuff and like push it all down. But then it created this suppressed kind of shadow side, you know? And I held that down for a long time, and particularly in the ceremony spaces where I was serving heterosexual males, cisgendered heterosexual males that didn't like that the position of hierarchical power was the sissy on the playground, shaking a rattle, you know, speaking in how the thinking can happen. I tried to just meet that with mindfulness, and it turned into a dynamic where the community really only thought that all I would ever do was sing and blow smoke on them or something, right? My foundation is literally being trained to protect my life at any cost with my bare hands. So in the ceremony space, it would be like maybe night 2 or 3 of ceremony, and I would find that I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't perform not wanting to be seen as something. I had to be the me that I was trained to be. And so I would have like go do a costume change like Aretha Franklin or somebody and come out in a karate gi with finger snaps. But it over time it turned into the kid who got trained and became a black belt at 21 years old. And he was so buried, he was so pushed down so far because the world said a gay man can't do karate and teach anywhere. It's a very long time ago. So this person started coming back up, and I think letting go of the being seen as an angry black man. Everybody's angry. Of course, I am angry sometimes, not all the time, but I get to be in all of my range of emotions and process all of those emotions that I came into this body as a soul to do without anyone trying to make it more than what it is. I'm a powerful man that knows his power. And sometimes being assertive, I'm no longer afraid of how that's read because I know what my heart is. I made the choice to remember that.
Really powerful. Thank you. I think that's a really beautiful lesson that can be taken by each individual person and worked with in their own way. And yeah, really finding that love for self and love for other to come home to. And letting the projections be just that, just projections. And yeah, I'd love to kind of zoom out a little bit as we kind of come to the end of this, and ask what your thoughts are on the psychedelic movement and its intersection with the queer community. So where do you think that they could support one another, and where do you see any deficiencies or rooms for areas for improvement in the psychedelic space, particularly with regard to healing for diverse identities?
Well, I think there's been some articles in Chacruna, if anyone cares to look at them, by I'm forgetting his first name, Belzer, who wrote about 10 things people can do to make psychedelic therapy more accessible to gay people, including abandoning the male-female pairs in the psychedelic therapy, and recognizing that gay people already have a culture, a psychedelic culture that can be tapped into. There's been a history of like queer people using psychedelics that people can ask about different styles of, they already know, they're already psychedelic savvy. A lot of gay people are. I think keeping up pressure on these big companies that are going to be providing or trying to form in order to provide psychedelic therapy, that they make sure that they include gay people and trans people in research as well as in the treatments that they're doing, and that they consider us when they're planning how the therapy is going to be done, and offer also that there can be a selection of therapists who might be more appropriate for different people, including having gay or trans therapists that can do the therapy. I know that can be done to make it easier for gay people. And it's true that if we don't speak out, you get shoved to the side because there's other people that are speaking out. So you have to keep up the engagement because there's a lot of competition for these substances out there.
Thanks for mentioning those recommendations. I believe the author's name is Alexander Belzer. Yeah, just so speaking from my professional angle, the above ground clinical trial movements are always lagging behind the underground. But one above ground researcher who dares to take a bold step in the direction of queering clinical trial practices would be Christopher Stauffer. And he is currently, I believe, at Oregon, and is in talks to develop a group treatment trial of MDMA therapy for gender diverse folks. So it's really encouraging to see that this work is also being reflected in some way above ground, but I'm sure that it, as I said, is lagging behind underground practices. I feel compelled in this moment because I see some energy in the chat around different spaces for folks of various identities as they intersect with psychedelic use. And I would just offer the idea that there are, because psychedelic experiences are so diverse, that there is always room for diverse groups as they intersect with psychedelic use, and always room for more. So would encourage people to continue to form their own groups to allow these ideas to percolate and find their own voice in those groups.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Clancy, I don't know if
just,
you're trying to
um,
say something. Yeah.
I just put in the chat article that I wrote for the MAPS bulletin on why we should study psychedelics in special populations.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Kevon. I think you're muted.
I was just being excited about Clancy's article, and you just saw my mouth being excited about that. I wasn't saying anything.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really beautiful and important that people of different identities, that we can create spaces for people of different identities to connect. And as you know, as you mentioned, Terrence, that there are more spaces, more identities, and there is a diversity within that as well. So providing these safe spaces for connection and growth, and all types of spaces. So I think that's um, it's a really interesting time for these types of intersectionalities, and so as many different spaces as we can create will just really help to provide that healing for those people and that opportunity for connection. So to kind of close out, and then we'll maybe have a few minutes for if anyone has any questions. I think, you know, one of the things that I think is really exciting about the four of you coming together is just the different angles that you're coming at in your line of work. You know, the psychedelic field is really broad, and you're coming at it from research, from activism, from therapy, from authorship, and from serving medicine directly. So maybe if we can just hear briefly from each of you, what do you see for your, I'll say your like sector of the movement, but within the path that you're on? We're real here. There's like bugs flying around. What are some areas of excitement or opportunities or paths that either you hope to forge, or for anyone in the audience who is hoping to break into the space, you know, from your unique perspective that you're coming into it with? What excites you? What opportunities or paths forward do you see? And yeah, we can maybe start with Clancy, if that's all right.
Well, I've been wanting to be a psychedelic therapist, and I have refrained from being an underground therapist, so hoping that I could do it above ground without losing my psychology license. So for me personally, that's something that I look forward to being able to do. I think the aspect of the psychedelic field that I'm most interested in is what is focused on in Chacruna, which is like the social justice part, and the recognizing the indigenous origins of the medicines that we're using, and acknowledging that and trying to reciprocate in some way. And I think that has to be a bigger part of, like, so many companies and so much investment and so much money that seems to be gathering around psychedelics, that it's necessary that there be some pushback on that, because it's a destructive force that even if they're pushing healing medicine, I just don't think it's going to be a good combination. So those are the things I'm most interested in, is getting the medicine to the people who need them, and making sure that the people who are the origins of this don't get decimated or ignored or ripped off in some way, like capitalism has been doing ever since it was born. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you. Being real bridges, culturally informed bridges for this work. Very important. Anyone else want to go next?
I'm super excited, and I advise anyone to just microdose and create your thing and get excited about that thing and make it a thing. I mean, I just did a 10-gram initiation ceremony for an actor, not my first of serving anyone at that dose. And he created this beautiful like acting training thing in the space where he was speaking and doing acting. It just became like acting therapy. I mean, you wouldn't think to really like do that. I would have never even thought. But I saw it and I was like, holy crap. it's like some micro acting type thing going on here. But I leave that to the theater people to create, and get excited about, because it is about it transforming in all of our hands into these new and nuanced and spore individual ways of existing in the world. And yes, still have those traditional things, of course. So personally, I'm excited about creating the micro martial arts, and to see what that does to someone. A brother was coming to ceremony. He doesn't want to do high dose ceremony. He doesn't want to do any of the ayahuasca. I want him so bad to do the ayahuasca, but you know, the men can sometimes be very stubborn. He got out of knee surgery and shoulder surgery within the same week of each other. And we were in there with the microdose and with some of Paul Stamets advised additions of other mushrooms. And I watched this man's body heal, and he was doing push-ups and punching. I was like, wow. And he is the one who had to tell me that the microdosing was helping him that way, because I'm still, you know, like you guys, trying to figure out what can work, what is working. And people are sometimes allowing me to experiment as they experiment on themselves. So that, and one more thing, I'm really excited about dosing with mushrooms and dancing on stage in a New York City showcase with other people that I've trained. And I mean, they're not dancers. We just got up with some flow art toys on mushrooms and opened a whole dance showcase. So that's the level of what's possible with medicine. If you're grounded, if you know who you are, if you honor your spore, you know, yeah, I'm complete.
Oh, thank you so much. I love that. There's so much possibility, and especially embracing these liminal spaces, because I think where these things intersect is where we can make some real magic happen, where new relationships and new things can form and evolve. And, you know, how can we combine all of the different beautiful aspects of life to create something, some fusion that's entirely new and so healing. Thank you. It's exciting. I want to see you dance.
I guess I can go next. I'm excited about diving deeper and deeper into my professional life as a psychedelic researcher, and it's a very small contribution to the world of healing with OCD, but I think having lived with someone with OCD and how debilitating it can get, how it robs you of life in general, and seeing how they reawaken to life after a single dose of psilocybin makes me want to understand the mechanics a little bit better, understand how best to optimize dosings for OCD, and you know, as far as it intersects with my other vested interest in diversifying clinical trials, I think I want to make sure that these dosing sessions are safe first and foremost for everyone, and doing my best to lead the charge in terms of making sure that we get all kinds of people into these trials, and making sure that the findings are indeed representative and generalizable.
I love that. It seems like there's a lot of different opportunities in the research world to explore psychedelics for different types of treatment, for different types of conditions, and then also for different types of people, and really understanding the profound potential that these medicines may have for across the spectrum. So that's really exciting. Thank you.
And I guess I echo everything that everyone has shared, and maybe just, as I like to say, we are traumatized in communion and we're healed in communion. I'm really excited by the ways to keep exploring the ways that the we heals the me. I'm energized by the humility and service of supporting each other in this work, and understanding that better, how we can do that. As I like to say, when in our integration circles, we have this mantra of you are safe, you are enough, and you are loved. And I feel like those three messages, I like to try to bring that into the work that I'm doing and how I'm understanding this space. You know, the healing pathways with psychedelics aren't chemical, they're phenomenological, they're experiential, ultimately. And so creating safe spaces and nourishing spaces and loving spaces for people to experience themselves and each other is a huge passion, and I'm really excited about it. Thinking about mutual vulnerability in these therapeutic spaces, thinking about how to bring conversations of love into the lab and marry those two pieces. Yeah, I think those are some of the things that I'm really excited about and some of the takeaways I'm going to take from this conversation tonight.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I like to relate that as well, or resonate with that. I say that the integration of my healing, my work is my healing, and the integration of my healing is my work. And the way that they feed each other, I've found to be really profound and this really positive snowball. So yeah, totally resonate with that. We are pretty much at time. If anyone has like a burning question that they want to ask, we can do it popcorn style. There's time for maybe one question. If someone has a burning desire, if the panelists don't mind staying for a couple minutes. Go ahead and unmute yourself if that's the case.
I just want to say, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone. This is such a lovely, it's fascinating to hear everyone's perspectives. So thank you. I just recently had my first ayahuasca experience at Solterra. It's been about 4 weeks since I returned, and keep on integrating and reading and learning as much as I can. So this is very, very profound and meaningful to hear.
So happy to hear that. Thank you, Tina.
Yeah, I just want to say something along the same lines. I resonated so much with so much of what you guys shared. I also had my first experience at Soltara with ayahuasca about 2 months ago, and the discoveries I made around like healing my own shame, growing up gay in this body, and all the ways I tried to like contort my body to like be perceived as more heterosexual. All that was just like undone in this epic night 2 ceremony I had. And it was just so cool to be in this space with you all and to hear that actually this experience is a shared one amongst queer people. So, and I guess the question I've had sort of the whole time is like, because I didn't know that existed before tonight. I sort of like, you know, thought that was just my own sort of healing journey. And I felt and also I have so many thoughts about like being closeted around my sexuality, and then being closeted around now, like having to come out as someone who has done ayahuasca and had a very life-changing experience. And I'm still sort of sitting with that, and also taking time to trust that all of that stuff is integrated within me. But the question I've had is sort of like how do I stay connected to this community? How do you guys find, because it does feel very niche, and we're sort of spread all over the world here.
I would say to keep your journey. I tell that to everyone in the underground who's going back out into the world, or even because our little niche community is like a little underground, even if you know there's an above and under in it, it's still that little pocket. So who you share your mystical journey with in all full detail, and if they go, huh? It takes away all of your energy, not all of it, but enough of it for you to start questioning your own journey and the beauty that you got from it. So I would say hold on. I also want to say congratulations to both of you for taking the medicine, and just keep some of those gems for yourself is my quick advice.
And I would say,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Clancy.
It's very quick just to say that you can go to chacruna.net, and we have a queer board for people, sexual minorities or whatever, if you want to stay connected to stuff that's happening around that.
I would also say that's a great suggestion. And I would also say, find your people. Psychedelic communities and psychedelic societies are such a great place. There's a huge grassroots out there of people who come together and find each other and see each other. Some are queer, some are not, but you'll find your people if you get out and reach out for them. So keeping in tune with that beautiful nugget of truth and wisdom and light, but also not being too scared to share it with others and to connect with others in that light. Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, and we'll continue creating more of these spaces through the Maloka too. This is my hope and dream, and wanting to be a safe and private space for this. So thank you all so much to our panelists for this amazing talk, to all of you for showing up for it. I really hope that everyone enjoyed it and found something to take with them today into their lives, into their healing journeys. If you enjoyed this panel, I highly recommend continuing to follow our panelists' work and journeys. So I think Clancy shared a link for Chacruna. I'll share some relevant links to do so as well in the follow-up email that I send out, which will also include the recording from today. So just to say as well, we have regular events through the Maloka for the public, as well as those who sign up for our membership. You can read more about this on themaloka.com. And our next event is a free event for our Inner Circle members. It's an introductory herbalism workshop with one of Soltara's plant medicine facilitators, exploring accessible and simple ways to connect with medicinal plants at home or wherever you are. So that'll be next Wednesday, May 11th at 11 a.m. Pacific. You can find more information under the events tab. Yeah, thank you guys so much for just showing up and sharing what's on your hearts and what's alive for you. I feel like I learned so much. And yeah, is there anything else you'd like to share before we sign off?
Thank you for the opportunity.
Just the sound of the bell.
You all lit me up. The lights are back. Thank you all so, so much. Everyone, I hope you have a wonderful evening. Ciao.
Bye-bye.